Welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving into a massive biological paradox. We're looking at a prehistoric creature that literally pushed the absolute physical limits of flight. Imagine a bird that completely dominated the skies millions of years ago, a creature so perfectly engineered for the air that its very existence challenges what we thought we knew about biomechanics. Let's get right into it.
To really wrap our heads around the scale of this thing, I want you to picture standing on a beach, say 25 million years ago. You look up and the sun is suddenly blocked out by a shadow. That shadow is cast by a seabird with a wingspan stretching nearly 6.5 meters or 21 feet across. To put that into perspective, the modern wandering albatross has the largest wingspan of any living bird today, while this ancient titan's wings were nearly twice that length. It's just a staggering feat of biology.
But what makes this creature truly mind-boggling is its sheer mass. When this bird was in its horizontal flying position, soaring above the waves, its body was the exact same size as a fully grown adult man. Seriously, if it somehow stood on the ground right next to you, its head would easily peek above your elbow. This wasn't just a bird. It was basically a feathered hang glider that could look you right in the eye.
Okay, Section 1. Unearthing a Giant, the North Carolina Discovery.
So how do we even know about this oceanic titan? Well, it's all thanks to a modern construction zone. Workers who are building a new airport terminal in North Carolina accidentally dug into the earth and uncovered this massive humerus. That's the upper wing bone. This was from 25 million years ago, a period known as the Oligocene, back when that entire part of the world was actually underwater. To instantly grasp the scale of what they found, just look at this comparison. In a typical human, the humerus is at most about 30 centimeters or 1 foot long. The one uncovered in North Carolina, over 80 centimeters long. And get this, that's with the end broken off. In life, it would have been even bigger.
That incredible fossil belonged to a species named Pelagornis sandersi. And even in its fragmented state, this single bone proved it was the largest winged bird known to ever exist, absolutely smashing all the previous records. It would have been nearly twice the size of the humerus found in today's wandering albatross.
Moving on to Section 2, the heavyweight matchup, Pelagornis versus Argentavis. Now, in the scientific community, anytime someone claims to have found the largest ever anything, it always invites some healthy competition, right? So, let's look at the heavyweight rivalry between the top contenders. Pelagornis easily takes the crown for the longest wingspan, at an estimated 6.5 meters. But there is another contender, Argentavis. This was a giant vulture-like bird that roamed the Americas up until about 10,000 years ago. While Argentavis had a shorter wingspan of around 5 meters, it had a much larger and heavier overall body mass. So Pelagornis is for sure the undeniable king of wingspan, but Argentavis still retains the title for the heaviest flying bird overall.
But this incredible wingspan creates a really fascinating paradox. See, the muscle power acquired for flight increases way faster than the actual power an animal can produce as it gets larger. Physics basically dictates that a bird this large crosses a theoretical limit where conventional flapping flight becomes incredibly difficult, if not downright impossible. For some context here, the heaviest living flying bird today is the Quarry bustard, which weighs around 20 kilograms, and they are notoriously clumsy flyers that much prefer to just stay on the ground. Pelagornis was even bigger than that. So how on earth did it stay airborne?
The crucial point here is that Pelagornis adapted to shed as much weight as structurally possible. Evolution prioritized keeping its human-sized body impossibly light. Estimates put its maximum weight at just 22 to 40 kilograms. Because of this extreme weight reduction, those lighter estimates actually give Pelagornis one of the lowest weight-to-wingspan ratios of any bird ever studied.
But just shedding weight wasn't enough. It had to change how it flew entirely. Instead of relying on impossible muscle power to flap those gigantic wings, it acted a lot like a modern albatross. It used a technique called dynamic soaring. Basically, it traveled the oceans effortlessly, not by flapping, but by gliding near the water's surface, extracting energy from the varying wind speeds. To put this kind of efficiency into perspective, modern Andean condors flap their wings less than 1% of the time they are in the air. Pelagornis likely functioned the exact same way, just on a much, much grander scale.
And to prove this, scientists actually ran the numbers. A 2014 study modeled the flight capabilities of Pelagornis using different wingspan and mass combinations. When they compared it to highly efficient modern gliders like frigatebirds and the wandering albatross, Pelagornis completely outperformed them. It would sink far less while gliding and could soar at much greater speeds than even the most elegant seabirds alive today.
In fact, aerospace engineers who study extreme aerodynamic efficiency often look to biological marvels just like this to inspire long-endurance modern gliders and unmanned drones. Its sheer size even made it less prone to certain types of ocean turbulence. It was, quite literally, the ultimate flying machine.
Which brings us to Section 3, Bizarre Traits and Ancient Origins. Knowing just how perfectly adapted it was to the oceanic winds, we really have to ask, where on the evolutionary tree does this master of the ancient skies actually come from? You might think these giant birds took hundreds of millions of years to evolve, but we actually only have to look back to shortly after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Around 60 million years ago, down in New Zealand, the very first known relative emerged. It was called Protodontopteryx, and get this, it was only the size of a crow. It lived alongside Waimanu, which is one of the first known early penguins. Over tens of millions of years, this little crow-sized ancestor slowly evolved into the 25-million-year-old gargantuan sea soarer we found in North Carolina.
Now there is a brilliant evolutionary deception at play here. Because Pelagornis soared over oceans and snatched its prey from the water, you'd logically assume it's closely related to the albatross, or maybe a pelican, right? But no, it's not remotely related to them. Skeletal clues, specifically some really deep similarities in its skull, reveal that its closest living relatives are actually Anserformiforms. That means this massive, terrifying oceanic glider is actually an ancient, highly evolved cousin of modern ducks and geese. Crazy, right?
And speaking of terrifying, we have to talk about its mouth. The fossilized half-meter skull possessed a long beak filled with what looked like extremely sharp needle teeth. But here is the bizarre twist. They weren't real teeth at all. True birds had already lost their actual teeth by the time the dinosaurs went extinct. What Pelagornis had was a highly serrated beak, basically these jagged, pointed extensions of the actual jawbone. It used them to brutally snatch slippery prey right from the surface of the ocean, all without ever having to land.
Section 4. The tragic irony. Why did they disappear?
So, if they were such flawlessly efficient flyers, ruling the skies with their fake bone teeth and an unmatched glide ratio, dominating the world's oceans for literally millions of years, what finally brought them down? Well, their downfall is a textbook example of the double-edged sword of extreme specialization. The very adaptations that made them undisputed kings of the sky became their greatest weakness. They had proportionately tiny bodies paired with those massive, unwieldy wings. Now, while modern albatrosses are known for being pretty awkward on land, Pelagornis would have been significantly worse. They were likely incredibly clumsy, completely vulnerable when landing, and had a highly limited ability to quickly take flight from the ground to escape danger. Because highly specialized creatures are intricately tied to very specific environmental conditions, they are incredibly vulnerable to even the smallest disruptions. And as we know, the Earth did not stay static. The second half of the Cenozoic era brought massive, world-altering climate events. The ocean currents changed, wind patterns shifted, and that very specific oceanic environment that Pelagornis completely relied upon to soar was disrupted. Ultimately, that spelled their doom.
Looking back at the tragic irony of the giant Pelagornis, we really have to ask ourselves a fundamental question about survival on Earth. Does evolutionary perfection ultimately guarantee extinction? I mean, when an animal pushes the absolute boundaries of physics to conquer a single environment, it sacrifices the flexibility it needs to survive on a changing planet. It's a pretty spectacular reminder that sometimes the most magnificent specialists are the very first to fall when the wind changes direction.